A courtroom door slams shut, and in that echo, a family begins to fall apart, because today, the truth about their lives isn't just being whispered anymore, it's being sworn under oath. And what Kody doesn't know yet is that someone he trusts is about to turn everything against him. If you think you've seen all the drama, stay with me, because this story doesn't just unfold, it explodes. And before we begin, I want you to tell me, whose side are you on when loyalty and truth collide? The courtroom feels colder than expected, almost unnatural, like the air itself is holding its breath. Wooden benches creak as people settle in, whispers ripple across the room, and every eye is locked on the same place, the defendant's table. Kody sits there, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, his fingers tapping against the polished wood like he's trying to keep control over something already slipping away. Robyn is beside him, her face pale but composed, her eyes darting across the room as if searching for reassurance that never comes. She clutches a tissue, though she hasn't cried yet. Not yet. Across the aisle, Christine sits upright, her posture firm, her expression unreadable, but her eyes burn with something far deeper than anger. It's finality. It's closure waiting to happen. Janelle leans back slightly, arms crossed, observing everything with a quiet intensity. She doesn't look emotional. She looks prepared. And Meri, she's the hardest to read. Her gaze flickers between Kody and the judge's bench, like she's caught between past loyalty and present reality. The judge enters. The room rises. Silence falls. And just like that, the performance begins, but this time there are no cameras to cut away, no edits to soften the truth. Only reality. The prosecutor stands, adjusting their papers, their voice calm but sharp enough to slice through tension. Kody Brown, they begin. Today, we are here to address allegations that go far beyond family disagreements. This is about control, financial manipulation, emotional harm, and a pattern of behavior that has finally reached its breaking point. Kody exhales slowly, shaking his head as if the words themselves are ridiculous. But his eyes betray him. There's fear there, subtle but undeniable. Robyn reaches for his hand under the table. Christine watches that moment, and something shifts in her expression. Because she knows something they don't. The prosecutor calls their first witness. Christine stands. There's a murmur across the room, like a wave building before it crashes. She walks forward slowly, deliberately, each step echoing louder than the last. When she reaches the stand, she doesn't look at Kody immediately. She looks at the judge. Then at the jury. And only then, she turns to him. For a split second, everything freezes. There's history in that glance, years of it. Then she speaks. I stayed longer than I should have, she says, her voice steady but weighted. Not because I believed things would get better, but because I believed in the family. Kody shifts in his seat, already preparing to interrupt, but his lawyer places a firm hand on his arm. Christine continues, but belief doesn't fix reality. And reality was, I was being pushed aside. Ignored. Replaced. Robyn's grip tightens around that tissue. Christine doesn't even look at her. She doesn't need to. I watched decisions being made behind closed doors, finances being redirected, time being redistributed, and when I questioned it, I was told I was the problem. The prosecutor steps closer. Can you give a specific example? Christine nods, her eyes briefly closing as if she's stepping back into a moment she's tried to forget. There was a property decision, she says. Coyote Pass. We were supposed to build a future there, together. But suddenly, plans changed. Resources shifted, and somehow everything started revolving around one household. She doesn't say Robyn's name. She doesn't have to. The implication hangs heavy in the air. Kody finally can't hold back. That's not true, he snaps. That's your interpretation, Mr. Brown. The judge interrupts sharply. You will have your turn. Silence again. But now it's thicker, heavier. Christine looks directly at him now. This isn't interpretation, she says softly. This is what happened. Janelle shifts forward slightly, her expression tightening. She knows her turn is coming, and when it does, things won't stay this controlled. Because Christine's testimony isn't the most damaging part. Not even close. The prosecutor nods, no further questions, for now. Christine steps down, but as she passes Kody, she pauses, just for a second, long enough for him to feel it. Then she walks away. Janelle stands. The tension spikes instantly. Because unlike Christine, Janelle doesn't carry hesitation. She carries evidence. She takes the stand without looking at anyone, placing a folder on the small ledge beside her. The prosecutor's eyes flicker toward it. "What do you have there?" they ask. Janelle exhales slowly. "Records," she says. "Financial records." Kody's posture stiffens. Robyn's face goes pale. Meri leans forward slightly, her confusion turning into concern. Janelle opens the folder. "And they don't tell a story," she adds quietly. "They prove one." The prosecutor steps closer, their tone sharpening with interest. "Miss Brown, can you explain what these records show?" Janelle flips through the pages slowly, deliberately, like each sheet carries weight. The sound of paper sliding against paper echoes louder than it should in the silent courtroom. These, she says, are transaction histories, shared accounts, property funds, investments. She pauses. And withdrawals. Kody shifts again, his jaw tightening so hard it almost trembles. The prosecutor leans in slightly. "Withdrawals? From joint family funds?" Janelle nods. "Yes. Funds that were supposed to be equally distributed for the family's future." A quiet murmur spreads again, but this time it's sharper, more reactive. The prosecutor continues, "And were they equally distributed?" Janelle doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she turns a page, then another, then finally looks up. "No," she says firmly, "they weren't." Robyn shakes her head slightly, whispering under her breath, "That's not fair," but her voice doesn't carry far. Janelle's does. "There were patterns," she continues, "large amounts redirected. Consistently. To one household." This time, she looks directly at Robyn. The room feels like it tilts. Kody leans forward. "That's misleading. Those were necessary. Necessary for who?" Janelle cuts in, her voice suddenly sharper than anyone expected. That moment hits like a crack of thunder. Because Janelle doesn't raise her voice often. But when she does, it lands. She pulls out a final document. "This," she says, holding it up slightly, "is a transfer authorization signed by Kody." The prosecutor's eyes widen slightly. "And what does it authorize?" Janelle swallows once. "A full reallocation of a major property fund without group consent." Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Crushing. Meri's eyes snap toward Kody. Christine slowly turns her head. Robyn freezes. Kody stares at the document like it's something he's never seen before, even though his name is right there. Clear. Undeniable. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Janelle says quietly now. "This was a decision." The prosecutor nods slowly, no further questions at this time. But the damage is already done. Janelle steps down, and as she does, the entire dynamic of the room has shifted. Because now, it's not just emotional. It's factual. And facts are harder to escape. Kody leans back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, his confidence visibly cracking for the first time. Robyn leans toward him, whispering urgently, but he doesn't respond. Because for the first time, he doesn't have control. And across the room, Christine and Janelle exchange a glance. Not of victory, but of confirmation. Because what they've been saying all along is finally being heard. The courtroom doesn't reset after Janelle steps down. It tightens like a rope being pulled from both ends, every person in that room aware that something irreversible has just happened. And Kody feels it more than anyone as he shifts in his seat, his confidence no longer steady but fractured, eyes flickering between the judge, the prosecutor, and the women who once stood beside him as partners but now sit across from him like witnesses to a life he can't fully control anymore. And before he can gather himself, the prosecutor rises again, their voice cutting cleanly through the tension. As they call the next witness, and there's a pause, a deliberate one that stretches just long enough to make everyone lean forward before the name lands. Meri Brown. And the reaction is immediate but quiet. Not explosive like before, but deeper, more uncertain, because Meri has always been the unpredictable piece, the one who stayed when others left, the one whose silence often spoke louder than confrontation, and as she slowly stands, there's hesitation in her movement, not weakness, but weight. Like every step she takes toward the stand is pulling years of memories behind it. And Kody watches her closely now, more than he watched anyone else. Because this is different, this is personal in a way the others weren't, and when she finally sits, adjusting herself slightly before placing her hands together, there's a moment where it feels like she might not speak at all, like she's still deciding which version of the truth she's willing to let go of, but then she exhales. And when she begins, her voice is softer than Christine's, steadier than Robyn's, but filled with something that feels far more complicated. I didn't come here to take sides, she says, her eyes fixed ahead rather than on Kody, but I also didn't come here to protect something that no longer exists, and that line alone shifts the air again. Because it doesn't accuse directly, but it doesn't defend either. It sits right in the middle where the truth usually hides, and the prosecutor takes a step closer, sensing the shift, asking gently, "Can you explain what you mean by that?" And Meri nods slowly, her fingers tightening together as if grounding herself. For a long time, I believed that if I stayed patient, if I stayed loyal, things would find their way back to what they were supposed to be, she says. And there's a flicker of emotion in her eyes now. Something restrained but present. But what I didn't realize was, while I was holding on to that belief, everything else was already changing, and Kody leans forward slightly at that, his expression hardening, because he can feel where this is going, even if she hasn't said it yet. And Meri continues, her voice gaining a little strength. Decisions stopped being shared. Conversations stopped being open. And eventually, I stopped being included altogether, and that lands heavier than expected. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet and undeniable, and for a second, even the judge seems more still, listening more closely, and the prosecutor asks, "Were you aware of the financial decisions Janelle described?" And Meri hesitates again, but this time it's shorter, sharper. Like she's choosing honesty over comfort, not at first, she admits, but I started noticing patterns, things that didn't add up, conversations that would end when I walked in, plans that were already finalized before I even heard about them, and now her eyes shift just briefly toward Kody, and there's something there, not anger, not even betrayal exactly, but disappointment. The kind that builds slowly over time instead of exploding all at once. And Kody shakes his head slightly, almost instinctively, like he wants to interrupt, but knows he can't. And the prosecutor presses a little further. "Did you ever confront him about it?" And Meri lets out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh without humor. "I tried," she says, "but every time I did, it turned into something else. Something about loyalty, about trust, about how I was misunderstanding things." And she pauses, her gaze dropping for just a second before lifting again. And after a while, you start wondering if maybe you are misunderstanding, if maybe it's easier to just stop asking. And that silence that follows is heavier than anything that's been said so far. Because it speaks to something deeper than money or property. It speaks to erosion, to the slow fading of a voice within a relationship. And the prosecutor nods slowly, understanding the weight of that admission. "And did you stop asking?" They ask quietly, and Meri's answer is immediate this time. Yes, she says, and it's simple, but it hits harder than anything else she said, because it confirms everything without needing to explain it further. And Kody shifts again, running a hand over his face now, his frustration visible, but contained, because there's no clear argument against something that's been experienced rather than just observed, and the prosecutor steps back slightly, giving space for the moment to settle before asking one final question. Based on your experience, would you say the family operated as a unified group during that time? And Meri doesn't answer right away, her eyes moving briefly across the room, landing on Christine, then Janelle, then finally resting somewhere in between, as if she's seeing all of it at once, the past, the present, and what's been lost between them. And when she finally speaks, her voice is quieter than before, but clearer, more certain. No, she says, it didn't. And that's it. No elaboration, no dramatics, just a statement that closes a door that had been left open for far too long. And the prosecutor nods, satisfied. No further questions, they say, stepping back. But the tension doesn't release, because now it's Kody's turn to respond, and his lawyer stands quickly, adjusting their jacket as they approach the stand, their tone sharper, more controlled. Meri, they begin, "You've had a complicated relationship with my client for years, correct?" And she nods, not resisting the framing. Yes, she says. And the lawyer continues. And during that time, there were periods where you were not actively involved in the day-to-day dynamics of the family. Isn't that true? And there's a subtle shift there, an attempt to reframe her distance as absence rather than exclusion, and Meri notices it immediately, her posture straightening slightly. "I was still part of the family." She replies calmly, "whether I was included or not," and that answer lands cleanly, deflecting the implication without escalating the tension. And the lawyer presses again, "But your perspective would be limited compared to others who were more directly involved, wouldn't it?" And there's a pause, a careful one, before Meri responds. "My perspective is based on what I experienced," she says. "And what I experienced was being left out of decisions that were supposed to involve all of us." And that's the line that shifts things again, because it brings the focus back to inclusion, to intention rather than proximity. And the lawyer exhales slightly, realizing the angle isn't landing the way they hoped. And after a brief pause, they nod. "No further questions," they say, stepping back. And Meri is dismissed, but as she stands, there's a moment, brief but powerful, where she looks directly at Kody, and this time there's no confusion in her expression, no hesitation, just clarity. And whatever connection once held them in place, it's no longer there. And as she walks away, the courtroom feels different again. Not louder, not more chaotic, but heavier, like the truth is no longer something being uncovered, but something that's already been revealed, piece by piece, testimony by testimony. And as the judge calls for a short recess, people begin to move, to whisper, to process what they've just heard. But at the center of it all, Kody remains seated, unmoving, staring ahead as if trying to piece together how everything unraveled so publicly, so completely. And across the room, Christine and Janelle sit quietly, not celebrating, not reacting, just watching, because they know something no one else does yet, something that hasn't been said, something that hasn't been revealed. And as the courtroom slowly empties for the break, that unspoken truth lingers in the air, waiting, building, ready to surface in a way no one is prepared for, and just when it feels like the most difficult testimonies are behind them. The next session is about to uncover a secret that doesn't just challenge the past, it threatens to rewrite it entirely. When the courtroom doors close again after the short recess, the atmosphere feels different, heavier, more suffocating, like the air itself has absorbed everything that's been said and is now pressing down on everyone inside. And Kody returns to his seat slower this time, no longer carrying that same rigid confidence he walked in with, while Robyn stays close beside him, whispering something urgent under her breath that he barely acknowledges, his mind clearly elsewhere, replaying testimony after testimony, trying to find cracks, trying to regain control, but across the room, Christine and Janelle sit with a quiet, almost unsettling composure, and Meri, now back in her seat, stares straight ahead, her face calm but distant, like she's already detached herself from whatever happens next. And the judge calls the room to order once more, the sound of the gavel echoing sharply, snapping. Everyone back into the present as the prosecutor stands again, their expression focused but carrying a subtle intensity that wasn't there before. Because now they're not just building a case, they're preparing to reveal something bigger, something that ties everything together and without wasting. A second, they call the next witness, but this time, instead of a familiar name, there's a pause. A deliberate hesitation before they say, "We would like to call an additional witness to the stand, someone who has not yet been mentioned," and that alone sends a ripple through the courtroom. Because unexpected witnesses in cases like this rarely bring simple truths, and Kody's head snaps up, confusion flashing across his face for the first time, his lawyer leaning in quickly, whispering, trying to anticipate what's coming, but even they don't seem fully prepared. And then the name is spoken. And the reaction is immediate. Subtle but powerful, Mr. Daniel Harris, and for a moment, nothing happens. Just a silence that stretches long enough to make people question if they heard correctly before a man in the back of the courtroom slowly stands, adjusting his jacket, his expression calm but unreadable, and as he begins walking toward the stand. There's a tension in his movement, not nervousness but awareness, like he knows exactly what his presence here means, and Kody watches him closely now, his brow furrowed, clearly trying to place him, trying to understand why this man matters, and when Daniel finally takes the stand, swearing in. With a steady voice, the prosecutor steps forward, their tone shifting slightly, becoming more precise, more deliberate. "Mr. Harris, can you state your relationship to the Brown family?" And Daniel nods once, his hands resting lightly in front of him. "I worked as a financial consultant, on and off, over the past few years," he says, and that single sentence lands harder than expected. Because suddenly, Janelle's documents, Meri's observations, Christine's experiences, they all start aligning with something more structured, something official, and the prosecutor continues, "And during that time, were you involved in advising on shared assets and property decisions?" And Daniel answers without hesitation, "Yes." And now the room feels like it's tightening again. Because this isn't emotional testimony anymore, this is professional. This is someone who doesn't just feel what happened, he understands how it happened, and the prosecutor takes a step closer. Lowering their voice slightly, drawing the room in, "Can you explain to the court the nature of the financial arrangements within the family?" And Daniel exhales softly, as if organizing his thoughts. Initially, the structure was fairly balanced, he begins. Multiple income streams, shared accounts, joint investment plans. It was designed to function as a collective system, and as he speaks, Janelle watches him closely, her expression unreadable but focused, while Kody's posture stiffens again, because this is entering territory he can't easily dismiss, and Daniel continues. But over time, that structure began to shift, and there it is, the pivot point, the moment everything starts to connect, and the prosecutor doesn't interrupt, allowing him to continue at his own pace, because the weight of his words is doing the work already. Funds started being redirected more frequently, and not always with full transparency, he says, and now there's a faint murmur again, quieter but sharper, because this isn't speculation anymore, it's confirmation. And Kody leans forward, shaking his head slightly, whispering something to his lawyer, who quickly scribbles notes, preparing for cross-examination, but for now, they can only listen. And Daniel adds, "In some cases, I raised concerns, recommended adjustments to maintain balance, but those recommendations were not always followed," and the prosecutor tilts their head slightly. Who made the final decisions in those situations? And Daniel pauses just for a second, but it's enough to make the room hold its breath, because everyone already suspects the answer, they just need to hear it, and when he finally speaks, his voice is steady, clear. Kody did. And that's the moment everything shifts again. Not dramatically, not explosively, but definitively, like a line has been drawn that can't be erased, and Robyn's hand tightens around Kody's arm now, her composure cracking just slightly, while Meri's gaze drops for a brief moment before lifting again, and Christine doesn't move at all, her expression unchanged. Because this is exactly what she expected, and the prosecutor continues, "Were these decisions documented?" And Daniel nods, yes, in most cases, and the prosecutor gestures toward the evidence table, including the reallocation Janelle referenced earlier. And Daniel glances briefly at the documents before answering yes, and now Kody exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair again. Because the pieces are no longer separate, they're forming a pattern, one that's becoming harder to defend, and the prosecutor steps back slightly, letting the weight of that settle before asking one final question. Based on your professional assessment, would you say these financial changes were consistent with a fair and equal distribution model? And Daniel's answer is immediate, no. And that word lands like a final confirmation, not just of actions, but of intent. And the prosecutor nods, no further questions, they say, stepping back. And now it's the defense's turn, and Kody's lawyer stands quickly, their tone sharper now, more aggressive, because they know the damage that's been done, Mr. Harris. They begin, "You mentioned working with the family on and off, so you weren't continuously involved, correct?" And Daniel nods, correct, and the lawyer seizes that immediately. "So your understanding of every decision would be incomplete." And Daniel remains calm. "My understanding is based on the records I reviewed and the consultations I was part of," he says, "not defensive, just factual," and the lawyer presses further. "But you can't account for private agreements, verbal understandings, or decisions made outside your presence, can you?" And there's a slight pause before Daniel responds, "I can account for what was documented and what was not." And that subtle distinction lands cleanly, because it brings the focus back to evidence rather than assumptions, and the lawyer exhales, realizing the difficulty of dismantling a witness who doesn't rely on emotion, and after a brief moment, they nod, no further questions, and Daniel is dismissed, but as he steps down, the shift in the room is undeniable, because now there's a bridge between emotion and fact, between personal experience and professional validation, and as the judge prepares to call the next part of the proceedings, there's a quiet tension building again, something beneath the surface. Because while Daniel's testimony confirmed the pattern, it also opened a door to something else. Something not yet fully revealed, and as Kody leans back in his chair, staring ahead with a mix of frustration and disbelief, Robyn whispers again, more urgently this time, but he still doesn't respond. Because deep down, he knows this isn't over, not even close, and across the room, Janelle slowly closes her folder, Christine folds her hands together, and Meri watches the judge with a distant focus, because they all sense it now. That whatever comes next isn't just another testimony, it's the moment everything changes. The moment the hidden piece finally comes into the light, and as the prosecutor gathers their notes once more, preparing to speak again. The courtroom falls into that same heavy silence, waiting, anticipating, bracing for what's about to be revealed, and just when it feels like the truth has already been laid bare, the next revelation threatens to expose something far more personal than anyone in that room is ready to face. The silence that follows Daniel's testimony doesn't fade, it lingers thick and suffocating, as if the courtroom itself understands that what just unfolded was only the surface of something much deeper, and as the judge signals for the proceedings to continue, there's a visible shift in the prosecutor's demeanor, a quiet confidence now replacing the careful buildup from earlier, because this is the moment they've been leading toward, the moment where facts alone won't carry the weight. This time, it's personal, and Kody senses it immediately. His posture stiffening again, but this time there's no edge of defiance left, only tension, the kind that comes from not knowing what's about to be said, but feeling certain it won't be good, and Robyn leans closer to him, her voice barely a whisper, asking if he's okay, but he doesn't answer, his eyes locked forward as the prosecutor steps into the center of the room and speaks with deliberate clarity, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to present testimony and evidence that goes beyond financial discrepancies and addresses the emotional and psychological dynamics within the family structure. And that single statement shifts everything again, because now it's no longer just about money or decisions, it's about impact, about what those decisions did to the people involved, and before anyone can fully process it, the prosecutor turns slightly and calls the next witness, Robyn Brown, and the reaction is immediate. Sharper than before, because this isn't just another testimony, this is the center of everything. The person whose name has hovered over every statement without being directly confronted until now, and Robyn freezes for just a second, her hand still resting near Kody's before she slowly pulls it back, her expression tightening as she stands, and there's a visible hesitation in her steps as she walks to the stand. Not weakness, but conflict. Like she knows that whatever she says here will change things permanently, and when she finally sits, her hands tremble slightly as she adjusts herself. Taking a deep breath before swearing in, her voice softer than usual but steady enough to hold, and the prosecutor approaches carefully this time, their tone less sharp, more measured. Robyn, you've heard the testimony so far, they begin, and your name has been referenced multiple times. Can you tell us, in your own words, how you view your role in the family over the past few years? And Robyn blinks rapidly, her eyes already glossing over as emotion begins to rise, but she doesn't break. Not yet. I never wanted to cause division, she says, her voice trembling slightly but carrying sincerity. I came into the family believing in unity, in building something together, and... There's a pause as she gathers herself, glancing briefly at Kody before looking back ahead. But things weren't always as simple as they looked, and that line hangs there, vague but heavy, and the prosecutor gently presses. What do you mean by that? And Robyn exhales shakily, her fingers tightening together. There were tensions, misunderstandings, feelings that weren't always communicated clearly, she says, choosing her words carefully, and Christine shifts slightly in her seat at that, not interrupting but clearly reacting, while Janelle remains still, watching closely, and the prosecutor nods, acknowledging the answer but not letting it settle. Were you aware of the financial decisions being made that favored your household? And that question lands directly, cutting through the careful wording, and Robyn's composure cracks just slightly, her eyes flickering again toward Kody before returning forward. I trusted Kody to manage those things, she says, her voice quieter now. I didn't question every decision because I believed he was doing what was best for the family, and that answer creates a ripple of tension, because it shifts responsibility without fully denying awareness, and the prosecutor takes a step closer, their tone still controlled but more pointed now. But did you ever notice the imbalance? The patterns Janelle described? And Robyn hesitates longer this time, the silence stretching uncomfortably as she struggles between honesty and protection, and when she finally speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. I noticed that things were changing, she admits, and that admission alone shifts the weight again. Because it confirms awareness, even if it doesn't fully accept responsibility, and Kody exhales sharply beside her, shaking his head slightly, but again, he doesn't interrupt, and the prosecutor continues, and how did those changes affect your relationships with the other wives? And this time, Robyn's emotional wall starts to break more visibly, her voice cracking as she answers, it felt like I was being blamed for things I didn't control, she says, her eyes filling now, like no matter what I did, I became the reason everything was falling apart, and there's genuine pain in her voice, something raw that complicates the narrative. Because this isn't a simple villain or victim situation, it's layered, messy, human, and for a moment, even Christine's expression softens slightly, though she quickly composes herself again, and the prosecutor nods, allowing that emotion to exist before asking the question that shifts everything once more. Did Kody ever discuss with you making decisions without the knowledge or consent of the other wives? and the room stills instantly, every movement freezing as the question lands, and Robyn's breath catches, her eyes widening just slightly as she looks forward, not at Kody this time, but straight ahead like she's trying to find the strength to answer without turning back, and the silence stretches, heavier than any before, until finally she speaks, her voice fragile but clear, yes, and that single word detonates quietly but completely, because it doesn't just support previous testimony, it confirms intent. And Kody's head snaps toward her, disbelief flashing across his face. "Robyn," he starts, but the judge cuts him off immediately. "Mr. Brown, you will remain silent," and now the room feels like it's holding its breath again. Because this isn't just about decisions anymore, it's about secrecy, about choices made behind closed doors that are now being exposed in the open, and the prosecutor follows carefully. "Can you elaborate on those discussions?" And Robyn swallows hard, her hands trembling more noticeably now, he would say, that it was easier to handle certain things without conflict, she explains, her voice uneven, that if everyone was involved, it would slow things down, create arguments, and tears begin to fall now. Quietly, but steadily, and I believed him, she adds, almost to herself. And that line lands with a different kind of weight, because it reveals not just action, but reasoning, justification, the mindset behind everything that's happened, and the prosecutor nods slowly, stepping back slightly as the impact settles across the room, because now the story isn't just about what happened, it's about why. And that's far more dangerous, and when the defense rises for cross-examination, their urgency is immediate. Their tone sharper than before. "Robyn," they begin. "You've stated that you trusted Kody's decisions. So is it fair to say that you were not actively involved in making those decisions yourself?" And Robyn nods quickly, almost too quickly. "Yes," she says. "I wasn't the one making them, and the lawyer seizes on that, so any implication that you orchestrated or benefited knowingly from these actions would be inaccurate." And there's a pause before Robyn responds, her voice quieter now. "I didn't orchestrate anything," she says, but she doesn't repeat the second part. And that omission lingers, subtle but noticeable, and after a few more attempts to redirect responsibility, the defense steps back, realizing the damage can't be undone completely, and Robyn is dismissed. But as she stands, she doesn't look at Kody right away, and when she finally does, there's something different in her expression. Not just fear, not just sadness, but realization, like she's seeing the situation clearly for the first time without the layers of justification that once protected it. And as she walks back to her seat, the courtroom feels changed again. Not louder, not more chaotic, but more exposed, like every hidden layer has been peeled back one by one, and Kody sits there unmoving, staring ahead with a blankness that wasn't there before. Because now the narrative isn't just against him, it's been confirmed from within his own side, and across the room, Christine exhales slowly, Janelle watches in silence, and Meri lowers her gaze. Because they all understand the same thing in that moment, that the truth has reached a point where it can't be reshaped or denied, only faced and. As the judge prepares to move forward, the weight of everything said presses down even harder. Because now there's only one question left, one final piece that hasn't been addressed, one confrontation that's been building since the very beginning, and as the prosecutor gathers their final set of notes, glancing briefly toward Kody before looking back at the judge, the room falls into that same suffocating silence once more, waiting for what comes next. Knowing it won't just be another testimony, it will be the moment everything either collapses or finally comes to light, and just when it feels like nothing more could possibly be revealed, the next moment is about to force Kody himself to face the truth he's been avoiding all along. The courtroom feels like it's reached a breaking point. Like every word spoken so far has stacked into something too heavy to carry any longer, and yet as the judge looks down at the case file and calmly announces the next phase, everyone realizes this isn't the end of the tension. It's the beginning of the most unavoidable part, because now there are no more witnesses to hide behind, no more perspectives to filter the truth, only the person at the center of it all. And when the judge calls his name, Kody Brown, you may take the stand. The shift in the room is immediate and absolute, a silence so complete it almost hums, and for a moment Kody doesn't move. His hands resting on the table, his eyes fixed ahead as if he's weighing something far deeper than just whether or not to stand, because this is the moment where everything said about him becomes something he has to face directly. And Robyn leans toward him again, whispering something urgent, something supportive, but this time he hears it, nodding faintly before finally pushing himself up from his chair. And as he walks toward the stand, there's a visible difference in him now, not the controlled authority he once carried, not the defensive agitation from earlier, but something more complicated, something quieter, like a man stepping into a version of himself he can't fully deny anymore. And when he sits, swearing in with a steady but slightly strained voice, the entire courtroom leans into the moment, because this isn't just testimony, it's confrontation. And the prosecutor approaches slowly, deliberately, giving the moment space before speaking. Mr. Brown, they begin, their tone measured but firm. You've heard the testimonies presented here today from Christine, Janelle, Meri, and Robyn. Do you believe their accounts are accurate? And Kody exhales slowly, running a hand over his face before answering, his voice controlled but carrying an edge of frustration. I think they're selective, he says, choosing his words carefully. They're based on feelings, on interpretations, not the full picture. And that answer lands exactly as expected, not outright denial, but not acceptance either. And the prosecutor nods slightly, as if anticipating it. Then let's talk about the full picture, they say, stepping a little closer. Multiple testimonies and financial records indicate that you made decisions regarding shared assets without equal input from the rest of the family, did you? And Kody shifts slightly in his seat, his jaw tightening again, but this time there's no quick dismissal, no immediate deflection, just a pause, a moment where the weight of everything said before presses down on him. And when he finally answers, his voice is quieter, more deliberate. Yes, he says. And that single word changes the atmosphere instantly, because for the first time there's direct acknowledgement, not filtered through others, not implied, but stated, and a faint ripple moves through the room, subtle but undeniable. And the prosecutor continues. And did you do so knowing that not all members of the family were informed or in agreement? And Kody's eyes flicker briefly toward Robyn before returning forward, and there's a longer pause this time, a visible internal struggle before he answers again. Yes, he repeats, and this time it lands even heavier, because it confirms not just action, but awareness, and Christine lowers her gaze slightly. Janelle exhales slowly, and Meri remains still, her expression unreadable, while Robyn looks down, her hands tightening in her lap, and the prosecutor nods once, letting the weight of that settle before asking the question that cuts deeper than any before. Why? And that word hangs in the air, simple but loaded, because it demands more than facts. It demands reasoning, motivation, truth beyond surface level justification. And Kody leans back slightly, his eyes closing for just a brief moment, as if gathering something he's been avoiding for a long time. And when he opens them again, there's a shift, not dramatic, not sudden, but real. Because I thought I had to, he says, his voice quieter now, stripped of the earlier defensiveness. And the prosecutor tilts their head slightly. Had to? They repeat, and Kody nods slowly. Things were falling apart. He continues. Communication was breaking down. Trust was already damaged, and every decision turned into a conflict. So I started making them on my own because it felt like the only way to keep things moving. And as he speaks, there's something almost reflective in his tone, like he's not just answering the question, but realizing the answer as he says it. And the prosecutor doesn't interrupt, allowing him to continue, because this is the moment where the story becomes more than just evidence. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, Kody adds, his voice tightening slightly now. I was trying to hold everything together. And there's a pause after that, one that feels heavier than expected, because it complicates everything that's been said before, turning clear lines into blurred ones, and the prosecutor finally speaks again, their tone still firm but less confrontational. But in trying to hold everything together, did you consider the impact those decisions were having on the others? And that question lands differently, not as an accusation, but as a mirror, and Kody doesn't answer right away, his gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again, and when he speaks, his voice carries something new. Something closer to honesty than anything he said before. Not enough. He admits, and that admission shifts the room once again, because it's not a defense, not a justification, just a recognition, and the prosecutor nods slowly, stepping back slightly as if giving the moment space to breathe. No further questions, they say. And now it's the defense's turn, but even. As Kody's lawyer approaches, there's a sense that something fundamental has already changed, something that can't be undone by strategy or argument, and the lawyer begins. Their tone measured but urgent, Mr. Brown. You've described your actions as attempts to maintain stability. Would it be fair to say that the family structure itself was already under strain before these decisions were made? And Kody nods quickly, almost relieved to have a framework to speak within. Yes, he says, things weren't stable, not even close. And the lawyer continues, so your actions were a response to that instability, not the cause of it. And there's a brief pause before Kody answers, and this time his response isn't as immediate. They were a response, he says slowly, but they probably didn't help. And that slight shift, that refusal to fully accept the defense's framing, creates another ripple, because it shows a level of self-awareness that wasn't there before. And the lawyer hesitates for just a second before continuing, trying to regain control of the narrative, but the momentum has already shifted. And after a few more questions that don't quite land the way they're intended, the defense steps back, and Kody is dismissed, but as he stands, there's a noticeable difference in him now, not just in posture, but in presence. Like the act of speaking openly has stripped away something he can't put back on, and as he returns to his seat, he doesn't immediately look at anyone. Not Robyn, not the others, just straight ahead, lost in something internal, while. Across the room, Christine, Janelle, and Meri sit in silence, not reacting outwardly, but each processing what they've just heard in their own way, because this wasn't the explosive denial they might have expected. It was something quieter, more complicated, and in some ways, more final. And as the judge reviews the notes before preparing to move into the next phase, the courtroom settles into a tense stillness once more. Because even though the testimonies have been given, the truth laid out piece by piece, there's still something unresolved, something hanging just beneath the surface, waiting to be addressed. And as the prosecutor gathers their final documents, glancing briefly toward the bench before stepping forward again, the room leans in one last time. Because everyone can feel it now, that whatever comes next isn't just a continuation, it's the turning point, the moment, where everything that's been revealed finally leads to a consequence, a decision, a resolution that will change everything. And just when it seems like the truth has finally been spoken, the final outcome is about to force everyone in that courtroom to face what comes after it.